So here is the first quadrant, or quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4. In quadrant 1, the x is positive, the y is positive, therefore the cosine is positive, the sine is positive, and of course tangent, which is sine over cosine, will also be positive. In quadrant 2, x is negative, y is positive. And so because x is negative, the cosine is negative. Because y is positive, the sine is positive. And because tangent is equal to sine over cosine, tangent will be negative. In quadrant 3, x will be negative, y will be negative, and so the cosine will be negative, the sine will be negative, and tangent, which is equal to sine over cosine, will be positive. In quadrant 4, the x is positive and the y is negative. So because the x is positive, the cosine is positive. Because the y is negative, the sine is negative. And because tangent is equal to sine over cosine, tangent will be negative. So this will help you know the signs of the sine, cosine, and the tangent based off of the quadrants. So if you're given that sine of x is equal 1 over the root of 2, and you're being asked to find the x, you should know that this would be a 45-degree angle. Okay, but here's the problem. This sign is obviously positive, and a sign that's positive could be in quadrant 1, it could also be in quadrant 2. That means the x could be a 45-degree angle, or it could be an extension to the second quadrant, forming a 45 degrees with the x-axis in the second quadrant. But we don't call it 45 degrees. We have to basically call it 135 degrees. Now, if this is confusing to you, that's very normal. So the question is, why is it 45 degrees on the second x-axis of the second quadrant, but in reality it's 135 degrees? It's because what you will do is you will say 180 minus the 45 of the first quadrant, and that's how you get your 135 degrees. Okay, so basically right now, if we're being asked what x is, you have to mention the one in the first quadrant and also the one in the second quadrant, which is 135 degrees of the second quadrant. Okay, that's for the case of sine. Let's try it for the case of cosine. So if cosine x is equal to 1 over root of 2, then you should know that the x is equal to a 45 degrees. Now, here's the problem. Cosine here is positive, and cosine is positive in two quadrants, in quadrant 1 and also in quadrant 4. And so it's going to be 45 degrees here and also 45 degrees here. But you cannot say 45 degrees in the fourth quadrant. That wouldn't make any sense. And instead, what you should do is you should say 360 minus 45 degrees, which would be equal to 315 degrees. So now x could be 45 degrees in the first quadrant or 315 degrees in the fourth quadrant. So let me just give you the trick here, right? So if your angle is in the first quadrant, things are very easy, right? If you're trying to get it for the second quadrant, you will do 180 minus the angle of the first quadrant. If you want to get it for the third quadrant, you must do 180 plus that angle. And if you want to get it for the fourth quadrant, then you must do 360 minus that angle. Okay, so let's just take the example of 45. That would be in the first quadrant of 45, and the second quadrant would be in 180 minus 45, which means 135. And the third quadrant, that would be 180 plus 45, which is 225. In the fourth quadrant, that would be 360 minus 45, which would be 315 degrees. That's how you find the angle based on the quadrant. Let's try more angles now. So in the case of tan x is equal to 1, x would be equal to 45 degrees. But here's the issue. Tan here is positive, and positive tan can happen in two quadrants, in quadrant 1 and also in quadrant 3. So it's going to be 45 in quadrant 1, but for quadrant 3, like I already taught you previously, it's going to be 180 plus 45. So it's going to be 225 degrees. Okay, let's now do another angle. So now let's try the sine of x is equal to 1 over 2. That means x would be 30 degrees. Now sine is going to be positive here, right? It's a positive half, which is possible in two quadrants, the first and the second. So it's going to be either 30 degrees or it's going to be here, which means it's going to be 180 minus 30. So it's going to be 150 degrees. Okay. Let's try now the cosine part. So now let's say that the cosine of x is equal to half. That means x will be 60. Now cosine here is positive, right? It's a positive half. It can be positive in two quadrants, in the first and also in the fourth. So it's going to be either 60 in the first, and in terms of the fourth, it's going to be 360 minus 60, which means it's going to be 300 degrees. Okay. Yeah, so that's pretty good. We can try one more. We can try a tangent now. So for example, if the tangent of x is equal to root 2 of 3, that means the x will be 60 degrees. Now tangent here is positive, and tangent can be positive only in two quadrants, in the first and also on the third. And so we're going to be having 60 degrees in the first, but for the third, it's going to be 180 plus 60, which is going to be 240. Okay. Yeah, it's that simple.